it comes to all the different subsystems on a tank, the weapons are by far the most interesting, to me at least. Recently, I made 2 videos examining novel US tank guns, specifically, ones using case telescoped ammunition. We focused on the MCAAC and MRAS programs, which had some very interesting results. Both created what can only be described as multi-role anti-tank machine guns. These guns not only had very high rates of fire, but impressive performance and flexibility. While we talked about the guns, we didn't talk about the vehicles that did or would have used them. For the MCAAC program, a vehicle came relatively close to entering service. Despite what many people think, no, it was not the HSTV-L. That was never meant to go into service. It's sort of like the VT-12. It was designed to test a concept, not be used in combat. With that being said, it was the basis for the vehicle we're talking about. But before we get into it, I want to talk about my sponsor. I'm partnered with Apex Gaming. They make pre-built PCs. If you're looking to upgrade, you should check them out. Link is in the description and comments. You can use my username as a discount code on checkout. Now back to the video. Created in the 1970s, the Armored Combat Vehicle Technology Program, ACVT, sought to revolutionize how the US Army designed its tanks. The ACVT program was quite extensive, but one of its main goals was to experiment with survivability, more specifically, seeing if speed could substitute armor. This question was being asked because in previous American designs, autonomy took a backseat to combat effectiveness. With a lighter and speedier design, deployment capabilities could be extended massively. The vehicle would fire accurately while moving at high speed, with the idea being that it would make sudden turns to throw off enemy gunners. To validate this concept, 2 test vehicles were made, the HSTV-L and HiMag. The HiMag was a variable parameter testbed, meaning its configuration could change to fit a certain test. The HSTV-L was more rigid, meant to represent what a practical vehicle might look like. Ultimately, the program was very successful. Their hypothesis was validated. In a way, speed could act as armor. Furthermore, the gun used by both vehicles, the 75mm Ares gun, proved to be quite good. Its performance against hardened structures was lacking, but it was reliable, could fire 1 round every second, had anti-tank performance on par with the 105mm M68, and could be used to engage aircraft. With program goals met, the next step was procurement. Both the Army and Marine Corps were looking for new light vehicles, so they decided to team up. The Army program was called MPG, Mobile Protected Gun, while the Marine Corps program was called MPWS, Mobile Protected Weapon System. During the ACVT program, the HSTV-L was very effective, and the Marines were very interested in it, but there was a problem. The company that made the HSTV-L, AAI, recognized that it simply wasn't a viable combat vehicle. Its range was abysmal, it was too heavy, it didn't carry enough ammo, and it would have been far too expensive. Weight reduction was extremely important, as the Marines wanted to lift the vehicle by helicopter, specifically the CH-53E Super Stallion, and the Army wanted it to be air deployable. This was a hard requirement, there'd be no skipping it. So they set about creating an improved version. It would be called the RDF-LT, Rapid Deployment Force Light Tank. They started by reducing the vehicle's size. Not only was the hull scaled down significantly, but the turret design was also made more conservative. The crew layout would be the same, with a driver and gunner in the hull and commander in a turret, but a later variant would experiment with a 2-man crew. Next, they began replacing some choice components. The gas turbine engine was swapped out for a turbocharged 6V53T, the same engine used by the M551 Sheridan. It developed only 350 horsepower. Compared to the HSTV-L 650, this was a lot less. However, cruising range was extended massively. While the HSTV-L only got 160 kilometers, the RDF could do 500. And while the horsepower was nearly halved, the power-to-weight ratio wasn't substantially worse. Top speed was reduced, but off-road performance wasn't hindered much. The diesel engine was an interim solution though. It was believed that when novel technologies like adiabatic engines were perfected, the RDF would use those instead. They promised to bring both fuel efficiency and high performance. A new transmission was installed as well, the Allison X200. Whereas the HSTV-L used a hydropneumatic suspension system, the RDF would use the M113's torsion bar system. It would also use the M113's tracks. Not only were these components already used and proven by vehicles in service, but they also drastically reduced overall cost. Ammunition capacity was increased, going from 26 to 60 rounds. All rounds were immediately available to the autoloader. Instead of 60 RPM, it could now fire at 70 RPM, or 1 round every 0.85 seconds. It would fire in bursts of 2 or 3 rounds. It's often said that this was done to degrade enemy armor, but that isn't really the case. The concept was suggested and tested, but the gun was designed to kill on the first shot. Much like the burst fire mode on a rifle, the additional shots were there to simply improve the chance of a hit or kill. Conventional tanks usually did this anyway, shooting a target until it is visibly destroyed. The primary engagement site, located on the turret roof, was on a rotary head. It could be used as an independent viewer or slave to the gun. A trunnion-mounted thermal sight was also optional. With 15 degrees of gun depression, the RDF could engage targets without exposing its turret, or much of it anyway. It used a digital fire control system, which was quite advanced for its time. Using thermal contrast, it could lock onto and automatically track targets up to 4 kilometers, both tanks and aircraft. In terms of protection, it was better off than you might expect. It was made entirely of aluminum, but in its basic configuration, it could take 35mm on the nose. For the side, it could resist rifle caliber rounds. With applique armor, the front could take 57mm, and the side 14.5. Combat ready, it weighed just 13.4 metric tons. It met the Marines' airlift requirement and was highly air transportable. It could be carried by C-5, 2 by C-141, and 1 by C-130. 2 variants were made, an anti-air version with 2 Stinger pods, and an export variant with the M41 Walker Bulldogs gun. It was marketed as a true multi-role tank. Although the RDF-LT was quite impressive, and could have been pressed into service by 1986, there were some issues. First, the Army and Marines disagreed about the choice of weaponry. The Army was not content with the 75mm Ares gun, believing it to be anemic. They wished to pursue a 90mm variant, but the Marines were on board. The Marines believed the 75 was fine, and that if the gun was made larger, the vehicle could no longer be airlifted. The Army would eventually go with the XM8 AGS, armed with a lightweight 105. The Marines, being the Marines, couldn't really get the green light for a tank by themselves, so they went with the LAV, or they tried to anyway. In the end, no one truly got what they wanted. The AGS and LAV AG never truly went into service. The Army wanted a gun that could kill tanks, infantry, light vehicles, fortifications, and aircraft, and ostensibly they got that. The Ares gun could engage all of those, it just wasn't great at all of them. When you ask for a jack of all trades, I don't think you can get upset when it's a master of none. Anyway, I think the RDF-LT is a very cool tank. It takes everything that was bad about the HSTV-L and improves it, while also being a bit more aesthetically pleasing, at least in my book. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.